Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
And welcome to Real Conversations with Lisa and Susan. I'm Susan.
And I'm Lisa. Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about women in technology. And we've got a couple of great guests, and we're really going to explore this subject.
And this is a topic we could talk about for quite a while. I mean, we're going to just barely scratch the surface of today's show. But we really wanted to address this issue since we live in Tech Valley. There's so much talk about all these positions that are being opened up in technology, and we want to look at, what does this mean for women?
Yeah, we've had a couple of shows on pay equity issues, and we have explored women in leadership roles and glass ceilings. So this is really a natural next step, or a natural drill down, if you will, into this particular topic.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, when you think about women in technology, what comes to mind? The lone woman surrounded by men, and what does that even mean, and why is it important to have, more women in this field?
Well, I've looked at, I've examined myself in some of the positions that I have. Why is it important to have, what is the value added for having minority and women at the table or exploring different fields? And in one position that I had in the past, the conclusion that I came to after talking to a lot of people and looking at the program, one of the programs I was administering, was I didn't want, I had this vision that there was this genius who was a woman, for example, and she's kind of like left off the table or off the court. And that's the person who could have invented, the cure for cancer, or, the rocket to the moon, the rocket to Mars, for example, or some other planet now.
Right.
Of course, that's not going to happen since they canceled that whole, program, the space program. But what I'm saying, like that one person who could have made such a huge difference, but because she was a woman, or because she was a minority, or both, obviously, she wasn't a player, and the world paid a price for that.
Yeah.
So when people who are brilliant and valuable are left off the court or off the table, the world pays a price for that.
And diversity in general is so important, because getting all those different perspectives. I've actually been in a number of fields that were dominated by women, and I recognized later on that not having men at the table really gave us less of a perspective. And so I think it's critical that we have more people at the table all the time in all different areas. So today we're going to be talking about that. So we'll be right back. Please continue to join us as we talk about women in technology. Thank you for joining us for Real Conversations. Today we're talking about women and technology, and we have two fabulous guests. First, we have Dr. Jane LeClair, who is the Dean of the School of Business and Technology at Excelsior College. And we also have with us Joanne Riddett, who is the former Chief Information Officer for the New York State Thruway Authority. I'm sorry. I knew I was going to get one of those things wrong. So welcome, guests. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to give our viewers a little bit, get to know you a little bit. So Jane, would you mind going first? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
My background is in nuclear, the nuclear industry, commercial industry. I was there for 20 years. After that, I'd worked with Excelsior College actually throughout my entire career in nuclear to try to get students to come into the program. But then after I left the industry, I came into Excelsior College and primarily started in the technical area. My background's also in business, so it was a great fit.
Oh, yeah.
And done a lot of other things as far as organizations involved with the industry. I know we talked a little bit about American Nuclear Society. I chaired the Education and Training Division. Regionally, I've been chair of the American Association of Engineering Education, and a variety of other organizations that work with not only women but students in general to try to promote them into the
Well, that's great. In a moment, we're going to discover why this is such a near and dear topic to your heart. Joanne, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background as the former CIO, and tell us what the Chief Information Officer is?
Okay, if I start at the beginning, I actually graduated from college to be a math teacher. And I taught math for a few years on Long Island and then got married and moved up to Albany. So I needed to look into finding a job when I got up here. And I took an exam for the state and became a trainee for the computer programmer area. I had various shifts to different agencies and ended up as the Chief Information Officer at the Thruway Authority. And the Chief Information Officer is the person who controls all the technology that are the applications that the agencies use.
Wow.
Now, the New York State Thruway Authority is not nothing,
No,
right?
that's a
I mean,
big-
it's huge.
Everybody knows about it because it's 300 miles from New York City to Buffalo.
That's
and
right.
Right.
There's
But,
a lot that it entails.
I mean, that whole Easy Pass initiative,
Yes.
there must have been a lot of technology. I mean, it's all technology, right?
Yes, it was very interesting actually because all of the technology that I'd been involved in prior to that, the applications were more narrow, I guess you would say. You would have your typical areas in IT. But when I got to the Thruway Authority, we had also the technology of transportation. Wow. So Easy Pass was one thing, and highway advisory radio, and I mean, it's just so many things.
I can imagine. And working with other states, too, right? Because isn't there like some sort of agreement that links New York
Yes.
with other states up
Right.
and down the East Coast?
Up and down the East Coast, and then they were also moving out to Illinois. And I mean, because there are different technologies. If you go down to Florida, it's not Easy Pass that's used, it's different technology.
Well, that's another show. But anyway.
No, but I just wanted to,
Yeah.
the audience to know how huge that role is.
That is huge. And the thing that's interesting about both of you is that, you've been in this field a while before, there was ever even conversation about women in technology. It was probably pretty sparse, as a trainee and also 20 years ago when you were first started in the field, right?
Right.
What was that like?
I think I want to say around the year 2000, when I was in the industry, we did a look, and it was about 0.3% of women who were managers in the nuclear industry at the time. So I'm sure the numbers have increased since then, but still they're not big. Even if we look at we have nuclear, electrical, and IT programs, and even there, our student population is around 10%, 10 to 12%.
Wow.
So still, that's really very low, and we're constantly trying to recruit women. And then, of course, you have to get them to stay in the industry after they graduate.
Right.
So you're trying to recruit women, and what are women saying about why they're not entering this field?
Well, I
I mean, or do they say, or do they even know?
Well, I think a lot of women, you really, if you look at it, technology is a great industry because the money right now is so good.
Right.
So why, as a woman, wouldn't you want to go and make good money?
Right.
But I think the field itself is not, as you come up through school, what are you led to learn, and you have to start early in technology. You can't, if you want to be a flight attendant, maybe you can start at 25 and say, I'm going to do that. It's pretty easy to pick up what you need to do. But you have this whole math, science background, depending on where you're going, that if you haven't, accumulated the building blocks as you've gone through school, then you have to start and go backwards. So a lot of students, don't necessarily, if you're not thinking that way early, it's hard sometimes to catch up on some of those things because you just didn't necessarily take the strong interest and may discover it late. So for some people, I think you have that.
And for you, like you said, you started as a math teacher, and I think that was even kind of strange, not strange, but odd.
I was one of the few people that were majoring in math, but if you're going to be a teacher, then that's sort of accepted. Because as we were talking earlier and saying that oftentimes you were basically steered in a different direction. It's like, why would you want to go into that field? Women aren't good in math and science. But if you're going to be a teacher, well, that's good. It's a good thing for a wife and mother to be a teacher.
Oh,
But it was always like, most of the women, most of the teachers for the K through, I would say, 8 level are women, but then usually there's a token man, and that's the math teacher, right?
That's right.
You know?
I think sometimes it's up until that age that women are interested in it, and then it kind of falls off. And as you go through high school, I think you'll find that more of the math science teachers were men, and so maybe the role model issue was a problem, and historically it's been a problem.
And are you familiar with what's being done at those grade levels to try to encourage more females?
You probably know some too, but there's a lot being done now to try to have, the clubs and the female role models and different activities that you can present differently so that women and girls are more, a lot of times more language-based and like a real application that they can use it for versus rote memory. If you look at a lot of the research out there, it shows that boys and men really accept rote memory easier. Just memorize that, don't ask why, whereas women want to know more. Well, how am I going to use that rather than just...
Yeah, I've read some of those studies. That's very interesting.
But isn't that really the better way to teach generally? I mean, certainly the better way to teach innovation, which I would think that math and science are going to be the field studied to generate innovation. I mean, teaching more context, teaching more about why are we doing this rather than rote memorization.
People today they want more answers. They don't want to just memorize. They want to know the why questions, whereas maybe 20, 30 years ago, people were more accepting of that.
I'm not so sure that's true in high school. Having been a math teacher in high school, I always tried to teach why they were doing certain things. I figured that people would be able to do better if they knew how to do it as opposed to just memorizing something. But a lot of kids didn't really want to know. They just want to get a good grade because they know they're looking to the future. They want to have the good grades to get into college.
Now, I'm interested in that you started as a trainee, right, for the state. You had this math background. You started, and you worked your way up to such a powerful position in a field that is typically a male-dominated field. Were things done to help you with that? I mean, in other words, were there mentoring programs? Were there anything like that, or was that more like your...
I think it's something that maybe there's more of it now, but I think, especially when I started, it was really something that you did yourself. You tried to network with other people and even look outside of your own agency, because there is a certain level to which you can reach in your own agency, and then to go further, you really would have to go somewhere else.
So, Joanne, how many different agencies did you go to or work at before you ended up at the...
Well, some of them are because the agency itself changed. But I started with social services, which is very, human services has a certain kind of person that you're dealing with. And then I went to corrections, very militaristic, very, not as many women around. And then I went back to social services, which split up, and there were a couple of offices, the Office of Children and Family Services and the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance.
So at each of these places, did you get a promotion to a new position as you moved to another? So you were willing to make those moves, because I know a lot of people aren't. They want to stay in one place, either because, well, there's many reasons, but one could be that they're just risk averse. They're comfortable there, blah, 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 blah. Others want to develop deep subject matter expertise or knowledge of the subject matter. But, I think women need to be willing, as you were, to take a little bit of risk, jump to a new place. I know I have done that in my career, and it's not the norm. But wondering how did you get to the position that you were in when so many other women did not? So one of those things is that you were willing to take a risk and move to a new position in a new agency, right?
Yes, and part of the thing with working for New York State is that up to a certain level you have to take an exam and you have to do well enough on the exam in order to get ahead. You know, there's the rule of 3 where you have to hire one of the top 3
Right.
grades in the exam.
Yeah.
So I did well on exams, that helped.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
because
math teacher, of course.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening at Excelsior College in terms of recruiting and, you know, what's being done to sort of help women be a part of this field?
Sure. Some of the things we go out, we do webinars. We do a lot of webinars to try to develop interest for women in technology. We have a Women in Technology series. We've recently started a Women in Technology scholarship so that we can help students who, you know, may have financial issues. So that it's really a field that we feel you could bring the diversity. If you think of some of the training that I might have gone through in a nuclear field, the different perspectives that I brought to the same case study that we may have done with a group of men, you just may see things different. So if you think about women engineers, what could they do differently when out in the field? So we try to promote the differences that people can bring to develop a rich kind of workforce.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because, you know, we're talking about women in technology, and I think that question of why is it so important to bring women and minorities to the table when it comes to this kind of issue. I mean, with technology changing so rapidly, it seems to be a really good time to be a part of this field.
It is. Some of the things that I think that have to be thought of earlier, as we just mentioned, are things that may be cultural, whereas your family may not, just men do this, women do this still. They're still alive out in families and in the culture. Things that girls might not get taught. Tinkering with a car or figuring out problem solving, whereas they may be more inclined to say, how do you do this, as opposed to jumping in.
Right.
Classroom situations still that exist where if you're in a group of men and women or girls and boys, where you may have women who may be the presenters while the boys or the men may be the person who's doing the activity more. And I think some of those things, the roles that people have previously played, still continue to stay out there.
There are some national organizations, though. Women in Technology, there's a Women in Technology organization, and they are trying to make women aware of the opportunities that exist. And part of that is showing people who are in those kinds of roles who can say how they got there, what kinds of things should you be studying, what kinds of skills should you have to look at this field and really consider that this is a good direction.
I think it's behavior change, though, for a lot of people. I can change my behavior, but how people interact together, I cannot just change everybody. And I've got to try to work on raising everybody's awareness a little bit to try to make it a workable situation within a workplace as well.
And I know myself, I at one point found myself in a situation where it was a male-dominated field. Well, I'm a consultant now, so it's a male, primarily a male field still. But I was at a particular meeting where it was all men and me. And I never thought I would be in a place where I would be uncomfortable in that situation because I'm usually comfortable in every situation. But there was a conversation that was taking place that I won't go into that I was so uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I can only imagine as a woman day in, day out, going into an office or going into a environment where it's primarily men and you don't, you feel so ostracized. You feel like you don't have someone to connect with or to support you. I mean, what was that like?
I think you really have to try to, for our students, figure out how you can develop support networks, because I think that's really so important. There's a little TV commercial on where a young guy is saying, you really need somebody to help you out. Yeah. And while you may not need the physical help to figure out that math question, you can go to the teacher, but you need the support. Yeah. I think that's where women, you've got to have somebody to talk to. You might want somebody to work with on a project, and somebody that you don't feel a threat by or the competition. Women may not be as much into competition, whereas the men may. So do I want to jump into that and feel uncomfortable?
And I think that's, there's two sides to that. I think that Sometimes because there are so few women, there are women who are not very helpful to other women because they feel that because there are so few, and I'm one of them, I don't really want to.
Open that up.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on the other hand, there is a lot of mentoring going on, and I know that in particular in New York State with the CIOs, there were a few women CIOs, and we would get together sometimes just to and help each other out, tell each other about jobs, really promote each other.
We had tried doing that probably 20 years ago, and it was really, really hard to get women to help other women. And whether that was the reason or not, but that was definitely.
Because you're really a unique breed. I mean, let's face it. There aren't, I mean, you said there were a few other CIOs who were women. So for you to have made it to the top, it's kind of like, you've all made it to the top and you look around and you see who else is there. And, you can do one of two things. You can reach out and hold each other up, or you can say, I don't want to have to share this space with anybody because, for whatever reason.
I didn't find very many women like that. We were all very good at helping each other and also looking down into the organization and trying to promote those people.
That's great.
Well, I think that's really key. I mean, for when women have made it to the top, we really need to, work
Reach
on
back.
that, reach back, and put a hand down.
I know even my husband would say to me occasionally, are there going to be any men there, or is it all women? Why aren't men allowed to be there?
Well, that's good. I like that question.
How come we didn't ask that when we were
I think
right?
there's a lot. Society of Women Engineers, you mentioned a couple. There are a lot more organizations trying to support women too, so that you can network there. So it's not just within your organization
Yes.
like it used to be.
Right.
And there's funding too. There's a lot of money to support women to enter into those fields. And you'd think women would want to be entering those fields. I mean, I'm a soft science person. Anytime I touch when I was really little, math was really easy for me, and I took to it very naturally. But as so many, as girls grow up, I was one of those that, math and science just kind of dropped off the radar screen for me, So I don't know. I would think we've got to do more to get the girls at the graduating from 8th grade into high school and really, I don't know, make it glamorous, make it fun, make it glamorous, make it something that they want to be.
And I think it is changing. I mean, it's certainly changed in 20 years.
Yeah.
Just the type of activities you can do today that you couldn't before. Make it fun to do those.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I was going to say, even the choices, because when we say women in technology, it's this, sort of bland, blah thing.
Yeah. What does
but
that mean?
and it's very different. Chief information officer is very different than nuclear science or an engineer or any number of potential fields. And I think that's one of the things too, is that women and girls need to become aware of the different choices, that it's not just one, blah thing in a lab coat somewhere, and maybe that's exciting for some girls, but there's all different kinds of things. And I think that's what was missing for me when I was a straight A student in math and science right through high school. And I didn't go into that field because I didn't know anything about what was out there.
Yeah, right.
But being a social worker and helping people, people told me
Helping
about
professions,
that. And I
helping
was like,
professions,
I'll
yeah.
do that. So had I known what I know now, I may very well have pursued that.
Yeah, especially because there's lots of jobs. I mean, that's one of the areas where there are the most jobs and the best paying jobs.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there are a lot of single parents out there, women who are raising kids, and if the money is excellent in the technology fields, get interested, go in that direction, because our students are primarily adult students. There's no reason why, if you have the basics, like you said, coming out of high school, you can still move into the field.
So what are people studying, and is it really harder than courses that aren't technology?
I would say, honestly, I think it is. It takes more work, but you have to have that inclination. There's real specific answers. Whereas if I can write a paper or I can know the concepts in social work, as you were saying, I think there are some differences there. That's why they call it a soft versus a hard science.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think when you talk about inclination, I think that makes a big difference. And you said you were very good at math and science. I think maybe just not knowing what to do with it. So
That's right.
the whole idea.
And not having
nobody I
anybody
knew-
to kind of walk her through to what was
Yes, nobody I knew was were in those kinds of fields.
I think a big thing today is women role models, because as you used to see in high school, they were mostly men that were the science and math teachers, but now trying to get a role model in the school, trying to put pictures up. If you look at just even the video type of things that are presented to students today, you see a difference in who's in those videos.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, I remember when Mattel caused a big dust up when they produced Science Barbie or Meteorologist Barbie or something like that. It was like, oh wow, this is great.
So I think, the same holds true for technology. The diversity that people bring, how they see things, how they analyze things is so different.
Yeah.
What are the different fields available for study?
And just so you know,
in
we
the-
have
in the-
about 2 minutes.
Oh, in the technology. Maybe that's not the right question.
Well, certainly we're in a big nanotechnology area. I mean, we have a nanotechnology concentration, but it's, again, very limited. Not a lot of women entering it. And it's such a huge area.
Well, could you tell us if somebody wanted to find out more about the different kinds of jobs in roles in technology, where they might look?
There's a million websites. I know you can go right on the Excelsior College website, and we have, these are the jobs you can look for in those areas.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, because
It's a good starting
It is a
point.
good starting point.
Yeah. And what about climbing to the top for a young woman who's watching this show and she's thinking, oh, I want to be Joanne Riddett. How does she climb to the top?
Well, I spent my whole career in the state, so it might be different in private industry than it is in the state. But
Well,
I
you
think
identified a ladder, a career ladder.
there is a
for
career
you.
ladder,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things is, and something that I always felt is that some people will look at their job description and say, that's not in my job description. But I think you have to be willing to do the work sometimes of the next step.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, good point.
That is a good point. Reach up.
and put in some extra hours sometimes. And that's not always possible for women, especially if they are, in a single house.
Well, that's good career advice in any field. Be who you want to be, not necessarily just who you are.
Dress for the job that you want to have, but I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's also act.
Act, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, as surprising as it is, we have gone through a half an hour very quickly. I want to thank you both
Thank you.
so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And we want to thank you so much for watching Real Conversations with Lisa and Susan.
Thanks for watching.